First contact. The planet Lycanis 9 wasn't supposed to have intelligent life. That's what the preliminary scan said. That's what the United Earth Science Directive promised when they hired me. Just catalog the flora and fauna. Dr. Reeves. Simple reconnaissance. 3 months, tops. I should have known better. Nothing in exobiology is ever simple. My name is Elias Reeves, and I've spent the last 7 years of my life studying alien ecosystems across the Orion Arm. I'm what you'd call a loner by choice. Most humans don't have the patience for the isolation that comes with my work. 3 months on an uninhabited world with only research drones and sampling equipment for company. That's my idea of peace. The landing was smooth, one of the perks of a planet with minimal atmospheric disturbance. My research pod touched down in a clearing surrounded by massive violet-tinged trees that stretched at least 300 feet into the sky. The air was surprisingly Earth-like, with just a hint of something sweet and metallic. I spent the first week setting up camp, calibrating equipment, and taking preliminary samples. Standard procedure. The planet seemed remarkably hospitable. Lush forests, clean water, abundant wildlife. Small mammalian creatures scurried through the underbrush, while bird-like organisms with transparent wings soared overhead. Nothing particularly threatening, nothing particularly unusual. Until the 10th day. I was collecting soil samples near a rocky outcropping when I noticed the markings. Deliberate patterns carved into stone, too precise to be natural erosion. I snapped images, ran preliminary analyses. The markings didn't match any known natural phenomenon. They were symbols, arranged in sequences. Someone, or something, intelligent had made them. I followed the markings, recording everything. They led me to a narrow ravine, hidden behind a cascade of bioluminescent vines. The ravine opened into a wider valley, and that's when I saw them. They moved like wolves, but stood upright like humans. Their bodies were covered in fur ranging from silver to deep charcoal, with muscular humanoid frames. They wore minimal clothing, just enough to carry tools and weapons. Some had markings painted across their fur in vibrant pigments. They were building structures, communicating, living in a society that definitely wasn't mentioned in my mission brief. I stayed hidden, observing. This was the discovery of a lifetime. An entirely unknown sentient species. I needed to document everything before making contact. Or at least that was the plan. I didn't notice her until it was too late. One moment I was alone. The next moment a rush of movement. A blur of silver fur, and I was pinned against the ravine wall. She was female. That much I could tell. Slightly smaller than the males I'd observed, but no less powerful. Her eyes were amber with vertical pupils that dilated as she held me in place. She was breathing hard, not from exertion, but from what seemed like shock or surprise. Then she leaned in and sniffed me. Not a casual sniff. This was deep, intense, as if she were cataloging my very molecular structure. She ran her nose along my neck, my chest, my arms. Her claws, sharp but carefully controlled, held me firmly but didn't break skin. I remained perfectly still. Every xenobiologist knows that sudden movements can be interpreted as aggression or fear. Either could get me killed. After what felt like an eternity, she pulled back. Her eyes were wide, ears perked forward on her wolf-like head. She made a sound, not a growl, but something between a purr and a hum that seemed to resonate from deep in her chest. "You," she said, in perfect, accented English. I was too shocked to respond. How did she know my language? "You," she repeated, pressing a clawed hand against my chest, right over my hammering heart. "Mine." That's when I noticed the translator device on a cord around her neck, a small metallic object that shouldn't have existed on a supposedly uncontacted planet. Before I could process this revelation, she grabbed my wrist and began pulling me toward the valley. "Wait," I finally managed. I can't." She turned back, her expression fierce but not hostile. "You are claimed. You come." "Claimed? I don't understand." "Your scent," she said, tapping her nose. "Perfect match. Very rare. Very valuable. You are mine now." And just like that, my solar research mission became something else entirely. She dragged me down into the valley, toward the settlement I'd been observing. Other wolf people turned to watch, some curious, others wary. A few bared their teeth. My captor, or claimant, apparently, stood tall, pulling me closer to her side. She growled something in a language I couldn't understand, filled with rumbling vowels and sharp consonant clicks. The others responded with various yips and growls, some appearing to challenge, others backing away. An older male, his fur streaked with gray, approached. He wore elaborate markings painted across his chest and face, and the others showed obvious deference. A leader, then. He circled me slowly, sniffing occasionally, his eyes never leaving mine. Finally, he spoke in the same accented English as the female. "You are human," he said. Not a question. "Yes," I replied. "My name is Elias Reeves. I'm a scientist, studying your world. I mean no harm." He tilted his head. "Scientists came before. Long ago. Left things behind." He gestured to the translator. "Taught some of our kind words." That explained the English, though not why a supposedly uncontacted species had previous human interaction that wasn't in any of my files. The female beside me spoke again. "He is matched to me. My scent bond." The elder's ears flattened slightly. "Kyra claims a human. This is unusual. Not my choice. The scent does not lie." She, Kyra, tightened her grip on my arm. "The bond is true." I cleared my throat. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand what's happening. What is a scent bond?" The elder studied me. "Among our kind, the lichen, certain individuals are compatible at the most fundamental level. Their scents call to each other. It is rare, sacred. It means you are meant to be her partner, her mate." My heart nearly stopped. "Mate? No, there must be some mistake. I'm not. We're not even the same species." Kyra growled, low and warning. "No mistake. The scent cannot be wrong." The elder nodded slowly. "It is very unusual, but not impossible. There are stories, very old, of bonds between lichen and other beings." He turned to address the gathered crowd in their native language. There were shouts, growls, what sounded like arguments. "Some accept," the elder translated for me. "Others do not. They question whether a human can truly bond." Kyra stepped forward, chest puffed out, tail rigid behind her. She spoke loudly, forcefully. Even without understanding, I could tell she was making some kind of claim or challenge. When she finished, the crowd fell silent. The elder turned back to me. "Kyra is daughter of our former alpha. She says any who question her bond may challenge directly." None stepped forward. He almost seemed amused. "She is formidable." I looked at Kyra with new understanding. Not just any wolf person, but essentially a princess of the pack. And she'd somehow decided I was her destined mate. "Look," I said carefully, "I'm sure in your culture this makes sense. But I can't just be claimed. I have a mission, responsibilities. I need to return to my camp." "You stay," Kyra said firmly. "You are pack now. Mine." "I'm not. The bond must be honored." The elder interrupted. "For now, you will remain with us. Kyra will ensure your safety." He looked at me with something like sympathy. "Perhaps in time, you will understand." And that's how I, Dr. Elias Reeves, exobiologist and self-proclaimed loner, became the claimed mate of an alien werewolf princess. As Kyra led me toward what I assumed would be my new, hopefully temporary, home within the lichen settlement, I tried to focus on the scientific opportunity rather than the absurdity of my situation. After all, how many humans get to observe an alien society from the inside? I just needed to find a way to communicate with my research base, explain the situation, and figure out a diplomatic exit strategy. Simple. But the way Kyra looked at me, with those intense amber eyes filled with absolute certainty, made me suspect that nothing about this situation would be simple at all. Among the pack, the lichen settlement was more sophisticated than I'd initially thought. What from a distance looked like primitive huts were actually ingeniously designed dwellings built into the natural landscape. Some were carved into hillsides, others woven between massive tree trunks or suspended among branches. Bioluminescent fungi provided gentle illumination, and an elaborate system of channels directed fresh water throughout the community. Kara led me to a dwelling slightly apart from the others, larger, situated on elevated ground with a commanding view of the valley. Her status as the former Alpha's daughter apparently came with certain privileges. "Your home now," she said, gesturing to the entrance. "Our home." I stepped inside cautiously. The interior was spacious, with separate areas for sleeping, food preparation, and what appeared to be a living space. Furs and woven materials covered the floors and walls, providing insulation and comfort. Various objects hung from the ceiling: tools, dried plants, small carved figures. It was primitive by Earth standards, but undeniably comfortable. "Listen," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I appreciate your hospitality, but there's been a misunderstanding. I can't stay here. I need to return to my research pod, contact my team. They'll be looking for me." Kira tilted her head, ears twitching slightly. "Your sense says otherwise." "My scent doesn't get to make my decisions," I countered, then immediately regretted my tone when her ears flattened against her head. "You fear us," she stated. "Not a question." "I don't fear you," I lied. "I just have responsibilities, a job to complete." She stepped closer, her movements fluid and predatory. Despite standing several inches shorter than me, she radiated physical power. What responsibility greater than bond, than pack? How could I explain career objectives and scientific protocols to someone whose entire social structure revolved around instinct and scent? I needed to try a different approach. "Tell me about this bond," I said. "Help me understand." Her posture relaxed slightly. "Bond is connection, deeper than choice, two souls that complete, makes both stronger, better." She tapped her chest. "Feels right here. You feel too, but fight it. Humans always fight nature." "It's not that simple for me," I explained. "Humans don't form bonds this way. We need time, shared experiences, compatibility on multiple levels." "Time we have," she said with startling confidence. "Experience we make, compatible already proven by scent." Her certainty was both frustrating and oddly compelling. Before I could respond, a low horn sounded from somewhere in the settlement. Kyra's ears perked up. "Evening gathering. Come, meet packed properly." The evening gathering turned out to be a communal meal. The entire settlement, about 80 lichens of varying ages, assembled in an open area at the center of the valley. Fire pits blaze, meat roasted on spits, and various foods were passed around on carved wooden platters. Kyra led me to a position near one of the central fires. The elder, who I learned was called Riton, the current Alpha, sat nearby. As we approached, conversations quieted, all eyes turning toward us. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. Riton spoke, gesturing to me, addressing the gathered lichens in their language. When he finished, there was a moment of silence before the crowd erupted in a cacophony of yips, howls, and what sounded like cheering. "What did he say?" I whispered to Kyra. "He welcomes you to pack," she explained. "Says you are first human bondmate in 5 generations. Great honor." 5 generations, so there had been human lichen pairs before. That explained the translators and knowledge of English. But why wasn't any of this in my briefing files? A young lichen approached, offering a platter of what looked like roasted meat. I accepted it cautiously, earning an approving nod from Kyra. All around us, the pack ate and conversed, occasionally glancing our way. Some looked curious, others skeptical, but none overtly hostile. As we ate, Kira introduced me to various pack members, her close friends, cousins, the pack healer. Each greeting involved a brief sniffing ritual, which I endured awkwardly. The food was surprisingly good, gamey but well seasoned with local herbs I couldn't identify. "Tomorrow," Kira said between bites, "show you territory, teach hunt." "I'm not much of a hunter," I admitted. A large male nearby snorted dismissively. Kira's fur bristled slightly, but she ignored him. "Not need hunt," she assured me, "but should know how. Pack values skill." The large male, Ulsark, I would later learn, spoke in their language. Though I couldn't understand the words, his tone was clearly mocking. Kira responded sharply, displaying impressive canines. Others around us tensed. Rattan intervened with a low, authoritative growl. Whatever he said silenced Ulsark, though the large lichen continued to glare in our direction. "What was that about?" I asked when things had calmed. Ulsark questions Bond. Kira explained, her voice tight. "Says human too weak for Alpha's daughter. Old argument. He wanted me as mate before. I refused many times." Great. Not only was I forcibly bonded to an alien werewolf princess, but I'd also made an enemy of her rejected suitor on my first day. This situation was getting more complicated by the minute. After the meal, as the gathering began to disperse, Rattan approached us. "Walk with me," he said to me. Kira looked ready to protest, but he silenced her with a raised hand. "Alone." Kira reluctantly remained behind, as Rattan led me along a path that wound up the side of the valley. The elder moved with surprising agility despite his apparent age. When we reached a lookout point overlooking the entire settlement, he stopped. In the fading light, the bioluminescent elements of the lichen dwellings created a hauntingly beautiful tableau below. "Beautiful, yes?" Rattan asked. "Very," I agreed honestly. "Humans came here long ago," he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Before my time. They studied, learned our ways. Some stayed, bonded with pack, created new bloodlines." "But that's not in any of our records," I said. "This planet was classified as uninhabited." Rattan's ear twitched. "Your people left. Those who stayed chose pack over human ways. Later, others came. Not scientists. Hunters. Took resources, killed many. We fought back. They left, told stories of hostile beasts, not people. That explained the classification. The early colonization attempts of the previous century were fraught with misunderstandings and conflicts. Many worlds were inaccurately labeled based on the reports of exploitative corporations rather than scientific assessment. And now you're back," Rattan continued. "Perhaps fate, perhaps cycle repeating." "I'm not like those others," I assured him. "I'm here to study, to learn, not to harm." "But you resist, Bond." His amber eyes studied me carefully. "Kira is special, strong. After her father died, many thought she would become next Alpha, even though female leadership rare. But she waited, said her bondmate would come. Many seasons waiting. Now you arrive, and her scent calls to you." The weight of his words settled uncomfortably on my shoulders. What if the bond is wrong? What if I can't be what she needs? "Bond not wrong," Rattan said firmly, "but can be rejected, with great pain. For both." He turned to face me fully. "You have choice, human, always choice. But ask yourself, what waiting for you beyond our territory that matters more than what could be here?" It was a question I wasn't prepared to answer. My career. The solitary life I'd built. They suddenly seemed less substantial than they had just days ago. "I need time," I said finally. Rattan nodded. "Time you have. But know this, Kira will protect you with her life. Pack is now your pack. Some, like Ulsark, may challenge. Be worthy of her choice." With that enigmatic advice, he led me back down to the settlement where Kira waited anxiously. The look of relief on her face when she saw me undisturbed was surprisingly touching. That night, Kira showed me to a sleeping area within her dwelling, separate from her own, I was relieved to note. As I lay on the surprisingly comfortable fur pallet, staring up at the unfamiliar ceiling, I tried to make sense of my situation. I was effectively a captive, yet not treated as one. Claimed, yet given choices. A scientist who had stumbled into becoming a key figure in an alien social dynamic I barely understood. One thing was clear. I needed to learn more. About the Lycans, about this bond. About Kyra herself. Knowledge was power, and right now, I needed all the power I could get. Morning came with the sound of activity throughout the settlement. Kyra was already gone when I awoke, but she returned shortly with what appeared to be breakfast. Some kind of grain porridge with berries and strips of dried meat. Eat, she said. Today we train. Train. Hunt, track, defend. She gave me an appraising look. You are soft, need strength for pack life. I wanted to be offended, but she wasn't wrong. Years of lab work and solo research hadn't exactly kept me in peak physical condition. After breakfast, Kira led me to an open area where several younger Lycans were engaged in what looked like combat training. They moved with incredible speed and agility, their natural strength enhanced by precise technique. Ulsark was there, supervising the training. His eyes narrowed when he saw us approach. Human comes to train, he said in English, his tone making it clear what he thought of the idea. Will break easily. Kira growled. He learns. You respect. Ulsark stepped closer, towering over both of us. Respect earned, not given. Even for Alpha's daughters. Pet. I felt Kyra tense beside me, ready to launch herself at him. This was quickly escalating into a situation that wouldn't end well for anyone, especially me. What would I need to do to earn respect? I asked, stepping forward slightly. Both Lycans looked at me in surprise. Ulsark recovered first, his muzzle curling into what might have been a smirk. Survive first hunt. Alone. Kira snarled. Too dangerous. He not ready. Then he not pack. Ulsark said simply. Just burden. I didn't need a cultural handbook to understand what was happening. This was a challenge, and how I responded would define my position within the pack hierarchy. What's the first hunt? I asked. Kira turned to me, her expression concerned. Trial for young pack members. Hunt jungle cat alone. Bring back proof of kill. Dangerous even for Lycan. And if I succeed? Ulsark laughed, a rough barking sound. If succeed, earn place in pack. No more questions. I looked between them, weighing my options. Refusing would mark me as weak, possibly endangering Kira's position. Accepting might get me killed, but it might also buy me the respect and autonomy I needed. I'll do it, I said. Kira's eyes widened. No, too dangerous. I need to do this, I told her quietly. If I'm going to stay here, even temporarily, I need to establish my own place, not just as your bondmate. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. I will prepare you. 3 days training, then hunt. Ulsark seemed disappointed that I'd accepted rather than back down, but he nodded. 3 days, then we see what human is made of. The next 3 days were the most physically demanding of my life. Kyra pushed me relentlessly, teaching me to move silently through the forest, to track by scent and sign, to use simple weapons like spears and knives. She showed me which plants could heal and which could poison, where the jungle cats liked to hunt, and how to avoid becoming prey myself. Throughout it all, I noticed something changing between us. The initial awkwardness began to fade. I stopped flinching when she came close, and she seemed to understand my need for personal space. We developed a rhythm, a way of communicating that transcended our cultural differences, and I began to notice things about her, not just as a research subject, but as a person. The way her ears flicked when she was thinking hard, her surprising patience when teaching, the pride in her eyes when I mastered a new skill, the gentle way she tended to my inevitable injuries, despite her fearsome appearance. By the third night, Exhausted from training but more confident than I'd been, I found myself genuinely enjoying her company as we sat outside her dwelling, watching the moon's rise. "Tomorrow you hunt," she said quietly. "Still can refuse. No shame." "I can't back out now." She nodded, understanding. "Well, Sark will follow. Not to help, to witness. Make sure hunt fair. And you cannot interfere." Her claws dug into the ground in frustration. "Pack law." We sat in silence for a while before she spoke again. "Why you come to our world?" "Truth." I considered my answer carefully. "To learn. To discover. I've always been drawn to understanding how different life forms adapt and evolve. Alone. Always alone." "Usually," I admitted. "I prefer it that way. Or I thought I did." She tilted her head. "Humans strange. Lycans always seek pack. Strength in numbers, in bonds. Maybe that's why your people bonded with humans before," I suggested. "We can learn from each other's differences." She looked at me with those intense amber eyes. "Maybe why you bonded to me. I learned solitude, you learned pack." There was a wisdom in her words that caught me off guard. For all the cultural and physical differences between us, she understood something fundamental about connection that many humans missed. "Get rest," she said finally, standing. "Tomorrow you prove place in pack, or die trying." With that encouraging thought, I retreated to my sleeping pallet. Despite my exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. Tomorrow would determine not just my standing among the lichens, but possibly my entire future. Dawn broke clear and cool. The settlement buzzed with activity as word of my first hunt spread. Kyra helped me prepare, checking the spear she'd made for me, applying a mixture of mud and herbs to my skin to mask my scent. "Remember training," she said as we walked to the edge of the settlement where a small group had gathered. "Jungle cat hunts from above. Watch branches, not just ground." Tan was there, along with Lsark and several other lichens I recognized from training sessions. The elder stepped forward, speaking in their language, then switching to English. "Elias Reeves seeks to prove himself through first hunt. Let all witness his courage or his failing." He handed me a small pouch. "Return with cat's tooth as proof." Lsark stepped forward. "I witness. Follow only to observe. Not help. Not hinder." I nodded my understanding, gripping my spear tightly. Kyra stood rigidly beside me, clearly fighting the urge to protest again. Instead, she simply touched my arm briefly. "Trust instincts," she whispered. "Trust what I taught." With a deep breath, I stepped forward, past the boundary markers of the settlement, and into the dense forest beyond. The first hunt had begun. The hunt. The forest closed around me like a living entity. What had seemed merely lush and vibrant from a distance became an overwhelming assault on the senses up close. Massive violet-tinged leaves blocked much of the sunlight, creating a perpetual twilight beneath the canopy. The air was thick with moisture and the sense of unknown flora, some sweet, some acrid, all foreign to my earth-adapted senses. I moved cautiously, trying to recall everything Kyra had taught me. Step softly, heel to toe. Listen not just with ears but with skin, with instinct. The jungle cat, Kyra called it a vex, was an apex predator, something like a cross between a panther and a monitor lizard, with chameleonic abilities that made it nearly invisible when still. Vex follows heat and movement. Kyra had explained during our training. Sees body warmth. Hunts from above. Very patient. I knew Lsark was somewhere behind me, following silently, waiting for me to fail. The thought sharpened my focus rather than distracting me. I would not give him the satisfaction. The first hour passed uneventfully as I moved deeper into the territory Kyra had described as prime hunting ground for the Vex. I found tracks, 3 toed prints with distinctive claw marks, near a small stream. Recent. I was in the right area. I climbed partway up a large tree to get a better view of my surroundings, scanning the branches of nearby trees. Vex preferred to rest on wide branches about 20 to 30 feet up, where they could survey the ground below. I saw nothing obvious, but that was precisely the problem. Their camouflage made direct spotting nearly impossible. Instead of continuing to hunt the Vex directly, I decided to use what Kira had taught me about its prey. Vex primarily hunted small deer-like creatures called Nari. Find the Nari, find the Vex. I descended and began searching for signs of Nari. Distinctive bite marks on low vegetation, small hoof prints in soft soil. It didn't take long to find a trail leading toward a small clearing where patches of blue-green grass grew. Perfect grazing ground. Setting up near the clearing, I prepared to wait. Patience was key. The Nari would come to graze, and the Vex would come for the Nari. I settled into the concealed position Kira had taught me, using branches and fallen leaves to break up my outline, applying more of the scent-masking mud to exposed skin. Hours passed. My muscles ached from holding still for so long, but I didn't dare move. Just when I was beginning to wonder if I'd chosen the wrong location, I heard it. The soft, barely perceptible sound of hooves on fallen leaves. A small herd of Nari entered the clearing, delicate creatures with iridescent pelts and small branching antlers. They moved nervously, stopping frequently to raise their heads and test the air. They knew this was dangerous territory. I remained perfectly still, barely breathing. The Nari weren't my target, but what came after them would be. I didn't see the Vex arrive. One moment the branch above the clearing was empty, the next a section of it seemed to ripple slightly, like heat waves above hot asphalt. Only because I was specifically looking for this distortion did I notice it at all. The Vex was massive, larger than Kira had described, at least 8 feet from snout to tail tip. Its scales shifted colors subtly to match its surroundings, but now that I had spotted it, I could make out its form. Sleek, reptilian, with powerful limbs ending in curved claws perfect for both climbing and killing. It was directly above the grazing Nari, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. I had 2 options. Try to hit it with my spear from my current position, risking a poor angle and almost certainly missing a killing blow, or move to a better position and risk alerting both the Nari and the Vex. I chose a third option. Using Kira's lessons, I found a small stone and threw it across the clearing, away from both myself and the Vex. It landed with a soft thud among some bushes. The Nari startled, heads up, and then bolted directly under the branch where the Vex waited. The predator's patience faltered. It lunged downward in a blur of motion, missing its initial target as the Nari scattered. The Vex landed on the ground with surprising grace and immediately pursued one of the slower animals. This was my chance. While the Vex was focused on its prey, I moved quickly to intercept it, spear ready. The Vex caught the Nari with a powerful leap, jaws clamping down on its neck. The smaller animal's death cry was cut short. I closed the distance, adrenaline sharpening my focus to a laser point. 20 feet, 15, 10. The Vex sensed me at the last moment. It whipped around, abandoning its kill, yellow eyes fixed on me with predatory intelligence. It hissed, a sound like steam escaping a pressure valve, scales rippling from forest camouflage to bright warning colors of red and orange. Everything Kira had taught me flashed through my mind in an instant. Don't run. It triggers pursuit. Don't freeze completely. It pounces on stationary prey. Maintain eye contact. Make yourself look larger. Strike first if you can. The Vex and I circled each other, neither giving ground. It was testing me, trying to find my weakness. I kept my spear pointed at its chest, where Kira had told me its heart would be. When it attacked, it was with blinding speed. It feinted left, then lunged right, powerful jaws snapping at my arm. I pivoted, barely avoiding its teeth, and thrust the spear forward. The tip scraped along scales but didn't penetrate. The Vex hissed again, more agitated now. It slashed with one clawed hand, catching my thigh. Pain flared hot and sharp, but I kept my footing. Aim for joint between neck and shoulder. Kira had instructed. Scales thinner there. The Vex circled again, more cautious now that I had proven I could defend myself. I used the moment to adjust my grip on the spear, searching for an opening. It came when the Vex lunged again, this time directly at my chest. Instead of backing away, I stepped into the attack, dropping to one knee and angling the spear upward. The momentum of the Vex's own charge drove my spear deep into the vulnerable spot where neck met shoulder. Hot blood gushed over my hands. The Vex screamed, a sound I'll never forget, part roar, part human shriek. It thrashed, claws raking across my chest as it tried to free itself from the embedded spear. I held on, driving the weapon deeper, using my body weight to pin the creature down. For several agonizing seconds, we struggled in a macabre embrace of blood and desperation. Then suddenly, the Vex shuddered and went still. Its yellow eyes, still fixed on mine, dulled. The vibrant warning colors of its scales faded to a dull gray. I remained frozen in position, half expecting the creature to revive and attack again.